Thank you, Marnie. Hi to everybody. Blessings to each of you where you are on the planet and in your life journeys. It's a pleasure to come back to Sangha Live to see uh, some familiar faces and many new to me. So I want to welcome you in all the parts of yourself. We are a very global Sangha, Sangha Live, and a bow as we begin to the beauty and the cosmic, uh, extraordinary nature of being able to come together in prayerful, devoted, conscious as best we can circle in such a wide, in such a wide ambit on the earth. This is I've been teaching a bit lately on the Buddha as a clairvoyant and on some of the maybe super, you might say, natural practices. And the Buddha was said to have taught in heaven realms and taught devas who assembled from far reaches of the cosmos. And however you hold those mysteries, literal or mythical or anything in between, here we are meeting in a way that could be almost unforeseen, even 10 years ago. To be here with folks in the UK and France and Germany and the Netherlands and Canada and the United States and other places. Over here on Turtle Island, sometimes called North America, for y'all over in Europe and Asia. This is extraordinary to meet in the Deva realm of Zoom here. So good morning, bonjour, uh, guten Morgen, and I wish I could say good morning to you in every language that you speak. All the parts of you are welcome in this Sangha, your ancestry, your race, your gender expression, your sexuality, your traumas and your gifts and privileges, and the way that karma, the past and its conditions have moved through history to become us, is more evident when we get to meet in global Sangha like this than it might be if we were meeting in a small circle in your town with a bunch of people that perhaps look and sound a lot like you. So welcome to the radical plurality of our human Sangha. And, um, and I'll add in a very traditional way, and again, you can hold this as literal or metaphoric, but welcome to all of our Sangha that may be present in spirit form, the ancestors of our bloodlines, the ancestors of our peoples, the ancestors of the place where you are. I'm coming to you from Northern California in the Redwood Forest, where the human ancestors here are the Southern Pomo peoples and the Coast Miwok peoples, um, and some of the animal ancestors here, are the great beings that walked the redwood forests long before even the Miwok and Pomo arose on the earth as a gift from the creative forces of the universe, uh, the great mammoths and sloths and dinosaurs of Turtle Island. And the redwood people themselves, right outside this window, the ancient trees that grow taller than any tree around here and gather the rains and the dew in their branches high up off the forest floor. Honor to them and the tree spirits that live in them. Honor to the spiritual ancestors of this lineage. I'm coming to you as a convert to the Theravāda Buddhist lineage, primarily held by the Forest Sangha of Ajahn Chah and the Mahasi tradition in Burma or Myanmar. So honor to my teachers, Jack Kornfield and Sylvia Borstein and Gil Fronsdal and Sayadaw Ujjanaka, Chamye Sayadaw, and Ajahn Pasanno and the monastics of the Forest Sangha, bows. to these wise beings in this Sangha that supports my practice and then supports our circle together. This invocation could go on and on because our positionality is infinite and our diversity is infinite. And as we begin our meditation, I invite you to take a moment and feel into your own body in the place where you are, and to admit the Sangha of support that surrounds you and that brought you here. So you might think of your own teachers in the spiritual paths. You might think of your own parents in the bodily path. This is one of the most ancient and fundamental of practices, to honor one's parents and ancestors for the gifts they gave in bringing us here. And I want to acknowledge trauma here, that for some of us, our parents are not easy to honor because their actions were not skillful or even were harmful. That's true for some of our bloodlines. I come to you from the ancestral bloodlines primarily of the English and Spanish, the two world-conquering colonial powers of the last half millennium. And I am, and I feel acutely the responsibility of carrying that karma into the next generation, and to heal through my own tissues whatever trauma I've inherited, and to uplift with whatever privilege I've inherited, the dharmas of anti-oppression, anti-racism, anti-colonialism, post-colonial recovery, and the possibility of a new turning, of a next turning in this world as we recover from colonial devastation and move into the next millennium in a way that has more soul and heart and healing to it. I also bear some bloodline from the West African and Caribbean peoples, and I honor those bloodlines that came in as my people came through Puerto Rico and the complex traumas of the slave history there. Bows to all of those people. So I encourage you to do this in whatever form feels like it is titrated, which means not too intense, just the right amount for you, to know that your peoples are part of what makes it possible for you to be here. Your peoples also are part of what your work in healing is. To bring the beauty of your dedication to well-being, not just to yourself and to your immediate community in this life, but to your bloodlines and your spirit lines and your ancestral lines. That our work is healing in all directions, in the present moment, in the past, because the dead are not gone, and into the future, because future generations depend on our healing for their own well-being. So take a moment and be with, in whatever way feels right to you, the circle of subtle and real Sangha that makes it possible for you to be here today. This is the beginning of our meditation, so as you do this, you find your seat in the circle of beings. If you're in a sitting posture, let it be tall, alert, dignified. You might, as my early childhood peoples, the Catholics, would say, lift up your hearts. You might lift up the heart. Invite the breath into the whole body, omitting no part. Maybe this means deepening the physical breath, spreading the breath out through the arms and legs and out into the space around you. And allow the breath and your intention for goodness and healing to pervade the body. Allow whatever challenge, trauma, heartbreak, grief, or fragile joy you carry be touched by the warmth of loving kindness and the energy of the breath, and the blessing of the ancestors and devas, spirit beings, human, animal, immaterial. One of the deepest symptoms of the post-colonial world is disconnection, the feeling of not belonging, not knowing where we live or who we are or what we should do or who we should be. And to take the seat of meditation is to claim, as the Buddha did under the Bodhi tree, to claim your right to practice, to be free. You do this every time you sit down and you insist that a moment of stillness is appropriate in this world. Take this seat with your whole being. And with this as a first meditation instruction, bring the attentive faculty of the mind into the here and now by becoming awake to the sensory profusion that is here. Notice sounds arising and passing. Whether your eyes are closed or open, notice the visual field. Let the visual field or the seeing and the field of hearing soften, letting them just be there. They don't need to be the focus. And then the body, present with the field of sensation, neither focusing on pain and discomfort, nor grasping at pleasure, but just letting the field of sensation be what's here. And if there's anything to do with this field, it's to allow it to fill with brightness, with the energy of breath and loving kindness and presence. And then the mind, the beautiful, wild, fast-moving, confusing, confused, thinking mind. Coming into the present is to become aware of thoughts and feelings in the present, and then to bring in the discipline of stillness. Stilling the body by letting go of following impulses that arise, settling into the dignified seat. And stilling the mind by letting go of following thought and feeling impulses as they arise. And in a really concrete way, not giving in to inner words, chatter, talk, judgment, complaint, celebration, inquiry, analysis. Just stopping. You start by getting a wedge in. Drop everything for just a moment and listen to silence. Feel the stillness of the body. And when a thought begins to arise, don't pick it up. The instruction here is not to relax all effort and then just notice when the mind has been wandering for several minutes. The instruction here is to brighten the heart and mind with the breath and with a strong or passionate interest in stillness, so that you see a thought at the beginning, not halfway through, not 20 minutes in, right away. If this seems impossible, brighten the breath, brighten the posture, drop into the body. Don't follow pain or discomfort, but feel the field of stillness. Connect with the space of the mind, silent, and then relax around that without losing stillness. If the mind needs something to hold, you might hold the word Buddho, Bud on the inhale, Do on the exhale. Buddho, awake, awake. Allow the breath to fall into the body, filling the whole body. From the web of the pelvic floor, the base of the vessel, through the belly and chest and upper chest, and subtly to the crown of the head, filling with aliveness and emptying fully. We'll sit in silence with these instructions for a few minutes. For the next 7 minutes or so, and then I'll come in with another little reminder. See if you can tune the energy of the body-mind to that sweet spot between letting go and holding stillness. But I'll encourage today, especially if this is new to you, to favor holding over letting go. To favor using a little more effort to catch thought at the very beginning, or even prevent it from arising because you're listening so deeply to silence, the inner silence, and let the energy of the breath body expand to fill the space. If it ever becomes too much, just drop it. Natural breath, open the eyes, no problem. But the encouragement is to practice in a way where we're not catching the distracting mind, but we're actually preventing it through an intimate presence with the body and its brightness, and being in deep stillness together on a beautiful winter's day. Notice the state of the heart-mind. Notice if the tone of holding stillness and silence, if that has become rigid. If so, soften. Or if it has become too lax and the mind has wandered. And if so, gather it in again for another few moments so that we begin and end the sitting period with the felt experience of balance. I'll end the sitting traditionally with the homage to the triple gem. So if this chant is new to you, just let it wash through as a prayer from the ancient Sangha that is offered through the lineage to support us in our search and our practice. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Letting it go, the space of the meditation. Any energies that have gotten stuck between the ribs or somewhere in the fascia and the viscera, let them loosen up a bit, move a little bit the body in a way that feels good. If you're not sure what feels good, take the spine into its 6 directions. So bend to the sides, forward and back like a little cat and cow, and the twist. Or just shake it up a bit. All right. So welcome to anyone who came in as we were practicing stillness. I'll talk for a bit here about the holiday, the theme, some ideas, and we'll have some time at the end for questions and discussion. If you didn't drop into the chat, anything that you want to say, a hello from wherever on the planet you are to fill out our circle, you can do that. And once again, just welcome to everyone. So yesterday was the full moon, and this full moon is a holiday in the Theravāda Buddhist world known as Māgha Pūjā. Māgha, the Great Assembly. It's the puja of the Great Assembly, and it is colloquially known as Sangha Day. There are 3 major holidays in the Buddhist calendar, one for the Buddha, one for the Dhamma, and one for the Sangha, the triple gem. The holiday for the Buddha is Visakha Puja, coming up in a couple months, usually around the May full moon. Visakha or Vesak, you might know that version of the word, celebrates the Buddha and the Buddha's birth, awakening, and death. So it's a efficient holiday, puts all three of those Buddha events in one day. So that's Visakha Puja. In the July full moon is Asala Puja, celebrating the Dhamma, celebrating the Buddha's first talk, the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma to his 5 ascetic friends in the deer park in Sarnath near Varanasi. Shortly, somewhat after his awakening, after the Buddha awakened, he chilled out for 7 weeks, mythically number 7, but for a while, under the Bodhi tree, tripping on how awesome dependent origination was and things like that. And then it occurred to him that the thing he had realized was so subtle, no one would get it, and he decided not to teach, and he was just going to chill out now, having uprooted suffering from his own nervous system and being, and nothing more to be done. And but a deity named Brahma Sahampati overheard the Buddha thinking this from the heaven realm, and the text tells us that as quickly as a strong man might flex their extended arm or extend their flexed arm, Brahma Sahampati disappeared from the Deva realm and appeared in front of the Buddha, bowed to the Blessed One, and said, "Blessed One, you're wrong. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are perishing for not hearing the Dhamma, and who would understand what you have to teach. See that this is true." And the Buddha only then extended his divine eye that is purified and stronger than the human, the texts tell us, and looked out across the world and saw that there were beings with little dust in their eyes who would benefit from hearing the Dhamma. I do want to acknowledge that this does mean that not all beings have little dust in their eyes. So there is the subtext in this that this is a subtle teaching, but if you're here, maybe you're not so dusty, and that's great, or at least you want to be less dust covered, and that is worth a lot. So blessings for that. Dust it off, people. Eye drops, little dust in the eyes. The Buddha said, "Oh, it's true. All right, I will teach." Having decided to teach, the Buddha said, "But who?" And he thought of his first 2 teachers who were yogic teachers of deep meditation in the Upanishadic tradition, perhaps, Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta. And extending again his divine eye, he saw that they had both recently died. Udaka Ramaputta only that previous night. And he said, "Oh, too bad," because they would have gotten it. And he says, "Who else will I teach?" And he thought, well, I've got these friends, these 5 guys, ascetics. I've been practicing with them for a bunch of years. But as you might know from the story, when the Buddha realized that torturing the body and causing pain intentionally nearly to the point of dying was not the path to freedom, and that it was actually necessary to nourish the body and rest in a much more embodied, peaceful meditation, his friends left him because they thought he had gone soft. They said, "Oh, he accepted food. We're leaving," and they left. The Buddha accepted food because he realized that nourishing the body was necessary for resting in the kind of meditation that was going to lead to liberation. And that meditation is pleasurable, deeply embodied, and easeful, none of which he was able to do in his near-death state after austerities. The food he accepted was from a laywoman named Sujata, who had prayed at a great tree in the forest outside her town 20 years before for a child. She had conceived a child, a son named Yasa, who was now 20 and is going to become a monk a little further on in the story. But for now, Sujata has this ritual of going to the tree in the forest every year with an offering for the tree spirit in gratitude for her son. And she's wealthy. So if you hear any myths that say that she was a milkmaid, nah. She was a wealthy woman of the town. She had a lot of power, and the food that she brought was the milk of 1,000 cows, fed to 100 cows, fed to 10 cows, fed to 1, so hyper purified. And then this super purified milk, very divinely potent, was put into a new vessel and cooked And it said that as it cooked, the bubbles were perfect and it swirled in a perfect swirl. And when she poured it into a brand new golden bowl to bring to the tree spirit, it poured like water flowing off a lotus leaf without a single drop being left behind. And she brought this golden bowl to the forest, to the tree spirit, and she saw a greenish, ancient looking being at the foot of the tree. And at first she thought, actually in the story, her maidservant first thought, oh, this is the tree spirit. And when Sujata came, her breasts lactated. She began to seep because the story tells us she had been the Buddha's mother for 100 previous lifetimes. And so he's met by his mother. His physical mother in this birth died when he was 7 days old. So he was raised by her sister, Pajapati, who becomes Māgha Pūjā, the first and eldest of the nuns. But Sujata was a mother in a former birth. And so her heart leaps when she sees this person, and she realizes that it's not the tree spirit, but that it's an ascetic doing deep practice. And she brings this purified food to him, and she says, as my aspiration was fulfilled, so may yours be. And she gives it to him, and the Buddha accepts it, and his friends leave him, but whatever for them. They're going to be okay. And she leaves the bowl as a gift also. The Buddha eats the milk rice, nourishes the body, and then goes to the nearby river, the river Naranjara, and says, if my aspiration is to be realized, may the bowl float upstream. He throws the golden bowl into the river, this very rich, expensive bowl, throws it into the river. It is immediately swept out to the center of the current and then flows directly upstream against the current, fulfilling his intention. And then the story tells us that a little ways upstream, it hits a whirlpool and is sucked down to the bottom of the stream bed, where there is a palace of an ancient dragon king, a Naga, who has been alive for enormous lengths of time, countless eons, because in this Naga's palace is a stack of golden bowls, because every Buddha before the Buddha does the same thing. And this, this seventh bowl lands with a clink on the pile of 6 previous bowls. And the Naga king says, oh, another Buddha has arisen in the world. The last one seemed like it was just yesterday. So the Buddha goes to teach his friends. They all become arahants. They are the first 5 awakened beings. So that's Visakha Pūjā in May. No, well, his awakening was Visakha Pūjā. That's Asala Pūjā in August. The turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. He teaches the first teaching. So then some months go by. They practice. He converts some more people. He converts Sujata's son Yasa and his 50 rich friends. They're kind of playboys. They're partying all the time. Yasa is coming home from a party and he's dissatisfied. It's late at night. He's this kind of rich kid, teenager, and he's coming home and he's talking to himself and he's like, what's it all for? What's it all for? And the Buddha knows that he's coming and puts himself in Yasa's path. And he says, Yasa, come. I'm going to tell you what it's for. And he gives him a teaching, and his Dharma eye opens. He becomes a monk, and his 50 rich friends, because their friend became a monk, they're like, okay, well, we'll do it too. They all become monks. They all become fully awakened. If only it were so easy. That's a footnote. But maybe it was then. And it's been a lot of centuries and a lot of pain. But we're doing our best. So the Buddha converts them, and then a bunch of other folks, 500 fire worshippers, all this, so that by the beginning of the next year, January, February, there's 1,250 arahants and fully enlightened beings in the world. And the Buddha has already, at the end of that first rains retreat, told the first batch of arahants to go out in the world and preach the Dhamma in the language of the people. That's a radical way of saying not in a rarefied holy language like Sanskrit, but actually in the tongue of the people. So blessings to translation. He says, teach the Dhamma in the tongue of the people so that beings with little dust in their eyes might thrive and learn the Dhamma. And so the Arahants spread out and they begin teaching, they begin the Buddha's ministry. And some months later, the peak of the springtime, February in India, it's gorgeous. The rains have stopped in November-ish. Everything is green and lush. Things are going well. And sometime in January, February, all these Arahants spread out all around North India. They all have the intuition that they want to see the Buddha again. And all at the same time they come back, and they all arrive back where the Buddha is staying on the same night, the full moon night in February. And this becomes the third of the holidays, Māgha Pūjā, the celebration of the Sangha. So this is Sangha Day. So that was yesterday. So traditionally, you take the precepts and the refuges and you support the monastics and you celebrate the Sangha. And we began our meditation today with an invocation of some different layers of Sangha. The spiritual Sangha, the Buddhist Sangha, your local individual Sangha. And because I think it's important for displaced peoples, such as many of us are, connecting with the ancestor Sangha and the peoples of our bloodlines and the blessings and traumas and privileges both that have come to us. Because the blessing of Sangha is the blessing of the understanding that no one comes to liberation alone. That even those who seem to come to it alone, like the Buddha himself, are not. The Buddha had teachers, the Buddha had friends, had folks that he practiced with. And so, and since the time of the Buddha, the gratitude for the Sangha and the blessing of dependence upon the Sangha, the reason that Sangha is a refuge, is that you don't have to figure it out alone. You don't have to become a Buddha. Buddhas are people who get enlightened when there's no Dharma in the world. Arahants are people who get enlightened when there's a Buddha in the world to teach them. So you don't have to become a Buddha. Footnote, this is a very Theravādan teaching. So leaving aside Mahayana ideas of becoming a cosmic Buddha for now, do that if that's your jam. But for the moment, the idea is that Buddhas arise when there has not been a Buddha in the world for a long time and the Dhamma has disappeared. And when the Buddha rediscovers the Dhamma, he says it's like finding an overgrown path in the forest and clearing that path enough to make it to a clearing where there's an ancient city that's been overgrown and not inhabited for a long time. The idea of past Buddhas is that this process repeats over and over, where there's a time when there's no Dhamma in the world, no teachings leading to liberation. And in that time, a being arrives who has the kamma, the conditions and the history and the ancestry and the practice built up to rediscover this path, to clear a path through the forest to the ancient city of the liberated ones. And they do that. They become a fully awakened Buddha, Samma Sambuddha. In the homage to the Buddha, Namo Tassa Bhagavato means blessed one. It literally means of the womb. It's the same root as the word vulva, comes from English, from Indo-Sanskrit. Bhagava means blessed one, but it really means of the womb of blessing. And then Arahato literally means perfected. The Arahats are the perfected ones. No more liberation needed, right? Fully enlightened. But the Buddha is Samma Sambuddho or Samma Sambuddha. A Samma Sambuddha can be translated as fully enlightened, but also fully self-awakened. And the self-awakening is the thing that Buddhas have to do, which is they have to discover it. So the Buddha didn't learn it from his teachers. He learned some things from his teachers, but then he actually had to go off on his own and find the way. And he found it through remembering this moment as a child under the rose apple tree, discovering the somatic, pleasurable meditation known as jhana, deep absorption. And that's the thing that he remembers. And then he uses jhana to direct his mind to the recollection of previous births and the insights that lead to the uprooting of suffering. So Buddhas have to do that on their own. But while there is a Buddha in the world, and we are in an era where there's still a Buddha in the world because there's a Dhamma that you can hear, right? In those eras, you can become an arhat by practicing what the Buddha taught, as long as the lineage still holds it. And that doesn't mean the lineage is like unbroken in some sort of mythic or, magical kind of way. Like, it's been challenging. The lineage has been, very threatened. It disappeared in India. It took a long winding path to be preserved in Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand, and then as it spread to all of the other Asian Buddhist countries and here in the West. But the sign that the Buddha tells us in the texts, in the Pali texts, that the Dhamma is still alive, is that people still practice absorption. That if the meditative states of somatic ease and stillness are still available, if they're still respected, is really what it comes down to, then the Dhamma can still take one all the way to liberation. When those become unrespected, lost to the world, all that's left is empty ritual. So if you're just doing the rituals, kind of honoring the statues, but you don't really get what refuge points to, and that really means you don't have a Sangha around that can teach you, that's the beginning of the Dhamma slipping away. So gratitude to the Buddha for teaching the Dhamma, and gratitude to the Sangha for preserving the Dhamma in the world. So all 1,250 arahants come back to the Buddha on the full moon night in February, and the Buddha gives them a teaching. And this teaching comes to be known as the Ovāda Pātimokkha. The Pātimokkha is the abbreviated version of the monastic code, and this is a hyper-abbreviated version of the monastic code and the teachings. So I'm going to pull it up and just read through it. This is the teaching the Buddha gave to those arahants. And the version that I'm pulling up is a version that's recorded in Discourse 14 in the long discourses. This is the Mahapadana Sutta. These verses also appear in the Dhammapada, and they're recorded in the Vinaya as well, the record of the monastic code. But here's one of the places that they appear. And we'll put the link to this sutta, this discourse, in the chat as well for you. And take a look at it, because one of the things this discourse does is the Buddha tells the story of all the previous Buddhas. So this, if you want to weave this into that lovely detail in the awakening story, where the bowl lands in the palace of the Naga king, who has watched all 7 Buddhas arise in the world. So here the Buddha is actually putting it in the mouth of one of the previous Buddhas, Vipassi. And so this is the Ovāda Pātimokkha. I'll read the English. This is Bhikkhu Sujato's translation. Patient acceptance is the ultimate fervor. Extinguishment is the ultimate, say the Buddhas. No true renunciate injures another, nor does an ascetic hurt another. Not to do any evil, to embrace the good, to purify one's mind, this is the instruction of the Buddhas. Not speaking ill or doing harm, restraint in the monastic code, moderation in eating, staying in remote lodgings, commitment to the higher mind, this is the instruction of the Buddhas. So these verses summarize the training for these new monks. This would have been a good thing for them to memorize as they went back out on their travels teaching. You can see from these verses that the teaching is grounded first in the core quality of renunciation and patience. Khanti parami. Khanti is translated as patience. It's also well translated as forbearance. So tolerating discomfort, tolerating insult, bearing the slings and arrows of the world, as our friend Shakespeare said. Um, he was unsure whether one should bear this, right? Whether one should be or not be. The Buddha is definitely on the side of being, because if you can't practice, if you're dead, so so you need the parami of patience, patient acceptance, and it's all heading for nibbana. Extinguishment is the translation for nibbana, the going out of the flame of craving and confusion. And then the ethical practices that are the foundation. No true renunciate injures another, nor does an ascetic, a samana, hurt another. I'll talk a little bit more about the central verse in a minute. That's the one really chanted and held as the heart of this. And then in the third verse, again, it's ethics, not speaking ill nor doing harm. So that's the first and fourth precepts. Restraint in the monastic code, moderation in eating, staying in remote lodgings or solitude, commitment to the higher mind. This is the training in meditation. So this is the instruction of the Buddhas. So that's the teaching that he gave in that place to those people. And I want to reflect a little bit on the core of that teaching and tie a few threads to this current moment. So the heart of this instruction is this central verse. Not to do evil, to do what's good, to purify the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. So let's think about those lines in turn. Not to do evil. Now, I grew up Catholic, and I have a bit of a reaction to the word evil. You might as well. There are some other ways to translate the Pali word papa, but most of the translators that I know, and some that I really respect, stick with the word evil, and I'm going to stick with it today. So if that's a challenging word for you in the Buddhist context, see if you can hold it as a word separate from its baggage in other faith traditions. Evil in this context is not the same as evil in like the Christianity that I grew up in, because there's no personification of evil that is divine. There is a personification of evil, Mara, but they're not immortal, they're not Satan, they're not evil per se. They are a delusion. They're the king of the realm of desire, is what they are. And Mara is a king with a family who rules over a territory, and you happen to be Mara's subjects. Unless you are an arahant, in which case bows to you, you have escaped Mara's realm. But Mara rules the realm of desire. And in some of the myths, when the Buddha is about to become liberated, the thing Mara says to the Buddha is, you cannot leave my realm. You are my subject, like everyone else. And the Buddha says, I am free to go. And that's when the Buddha calls on the goddess of the earth to attest to the Buddha's merit in having practiced for so long to cultivate these paramis. In the Thai version, the Buddha touches the earth, calling upon the earth herself, very much in the feminine, to remember and witness his long practice. And in the Thai version, she walks up out of the river where she's been bathing and wrings out her long hair, and the flood of water that pours from her hair washes away the armies of Mara. So evil is not a divine force in Buddhism, but it's a way of talking about harmful action in the world. And here it's important to understand that harmful action in the world is connected deeply to both the conditions under which we experience our lives, right? The conditions of our ancestry, of the world around us, all of the traumas that were subject to us, all of the oppressions that have come to bear upon us, those affect what we are able to choose. But our kamma or karma is our own. And this is one place where the Buddhist teachings on karma can be difficult for postmodern folks who really find refuge in the social justice teachings around oppression. Contemporary justice teachings often emphasize that the forces of oppression have been so terrible and intense that it's appropriate to forgive us for our actions that have come out of them, right? Like the fact that that I have a certain rage around race in America or capitalism in America, and I've got a little bit of those, right? It would be an appropriate justice consolation to acknowledge that I have those partly because I've been so harmed, and my people have been harmed. My people also caused harm. Both of those are here. And but if we take this too far, we might land in the felt sense that people are not responsible for their actions because they're so oppressed. And the Buddha insists that it is your own actions whose fruit you bear. And so the thing we have is choice. And choice is difficult when there's been oppression, but we do have it. And so the thing that I understand as evil is actions that cause harm that we chose in a certain way, right? That we have not done or been able to do or been willing to do the kind of practice that would allow us to renounce causing harm, right? At the heart of the Buddhist discipline is the renunciation of actions that cause harm. And that means I have an impulse to hurt someone and I'm not going to do it, right? And maybe we can say, understanding trauma, that hurt people, you know that phrase, right? So yeah, I was hurt and I'm going to take out that hurt on someone else. And it's a remarkable act of discipline and Dhamma. And you need the Sangha to support you to do this, to say, even though I was hurt, I refuse to pass on that hurt to another. And even though my rage is justified and my fear is justified, I will not pass on that trauma to another. And so I think this line, do not do evil, it can ring as harsh or punishing or, all the things that you might think of as evil. I think I really read it as, to the extent that I can get my hands on the reins of the mind, I refuse to pass on to another the hurt that I suffered and that my people suffered and that I see in the world. I will not pass on the trauma. And that is hard to do. And that's part of our discipline. The flip side is the second line, not to do evil, to do the good. So it's not enough to resist causing harm, but we actually have to cultivate the wholesome states. That's generosity, that's loving kindness and compassion, that's care for beings, that's giving, that is, uplifting goodness in our communities and in our life. It's not enough to not hurt another being, but we actually have to do the healing in ourselves that enables us to be a bright light in the world, a light for goodness. So to not do evil, but to do good. And we can't do either of those actually without the third discipline in the verse, which is to purify the mind. Because the impulses of evil and the impulses of grasping and desire, and even the confused positive impulses of saving people, let's say, you probably have some of that impulse too. But if that comes from craving and demanding that things be otherwise, if it comes from rage or fear or judgment or hatred of the enemy, it might succeed in some ways, like rage totally can topple empires, but then what? Without the mind being clear, we will transmit to the next generation the traumas that we have not yet healed. And it's the mind, and mind here means mind, heart, somatic being, nervous system, ancestral soul force, let's say that. Without purifying that, which really means without bringing it to to the kind of stillness and loving kindness that I can control, that I can call upon at will. Not just that occasionally a mystical state of stillness comes upon and it's grace. I'll take it, but we need more. We actually need to be able to cultivate clarity and to live into that clarity as a discipline every day, to be able to intervene when the impulses pull us away from goodness. So this is meditative cultivation. This is concentration, if you like that word. This is meditative immersion. This is the intentional cultivation of loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity, the Brahma Viharas. So these are the disciplines the Buddha taught his arahants to teach others. Don't do evil, do good, purify the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. I've been talking with my peers that are teachers, senior students that are my friends, and my own teachers about the state of the world lately, what's happening. And as you undoubtedly know, things are bad in so many places. Things are always bad in a lot of places because greed, hatred, and delusion are not the unique conditions of late colonialism or heteropatriarchy or any of the particular things that we suffer from right now. Whatever you think we're suffering from, those are just my words for that from my California lefty positionality. Apologies if that's not yours. Not apologies, but that's where I'm coming from. Whatever I think the world is suffering from, I like the Buddhist diagnosis that it comes down to greed, hatred, and delusion, and that those are ancient, hard to uproot. They reappear everywhere that awakening has not taken root. And so the conditions of our world are not unique. Even the climate crisis, which seems somewhat unique, it doesn't seem like humans have by themselves altered the global ecosystem before. But it's not radically unique in the sense that it's obvious to see how it's based in greed and hunger and wanting and possession and loss of contact with the earth and the animal beings and the ancestors and the spirits and profound disconnection from nature. And then the colonial system, the way that our world now is so marked on nearly every square foot of land in nearly every human soul by the ravages of the process of European empire over the last 500 years. That's not to say that the Europeans are the cause of all evil. Evil was here before, and it will be here after. But to be present with our current situation means to understand how our practice can meet the particularities of this moment. And that means being real with what's happening now. At the heart of the Buddhist response to evil and the cultivation of the good is the understanding that actions always bear fruit, and that action that is unhealed from one generation to the next will bear fruit in a later generation. In the Buddhist sense, this can be partly understood in the context of rebirth, and I'm not going to go deeply into that. I talk about it a lot in other places. You can find those talks. But, if you do something really terrible and you don't bear the fruit of it in this lifetime, you will encounter it in a later lifetime. And whatever that means, however you take that materially or mythically again, you can also take it ancestrally. And that the harm that some of our ancestors caused will bear fruit for later generations. You can think of this as generational trauma or epigenetic trauma, if you like that kind of language. I really just want to say that it's a core Dharma discipline to understand history and the world as repeating cycles, and that if things are not healed, they will come back. And I'm saying this as a preface, not to do a deep diversion, but just to do what I think now is our responsibility as Dharma teachers. And with my hand heavy on my heart and holding the hands of my dear Sangha, I want to direct our attention for a moment to the crisis in Gaza and the actions of both the Palestinian people and the Israelis there, without making a facile equation. And to say that if I were to sit here and mention that conflict, or to talk in generalities about the result of trauma expressing through generations in the world, without acknowledging that it is so painful to see what is happening there and what is being done, particularly in this moment, by the Israeli government. It is so painful. And I want to just encourage us, whatever our political leaning, to consider taking the radical Buddhist approach of, first of all, not taking sides, but also not letting go of seeing clearly what's happening and the directionality and the imbalance in the harm that's being caused. And to extend our hearts toward safety for all people. And in this very moment, I'm holding as a deep prayer for the end of this war, for a ceasefire in this war, and for the safety of the Palestinian people, for the return of hostages, and for the end of the crisis there in a way that is productive of peace and security for all beings there. And I've just come to feel like it's my responsibility as a teacher not to not say that. So I want to just bow to the reality of that crisis and encourage us to not give in, perhaps, to the temptation to use our Dhamma practice as a way to avoid being real with what's happening and being engaged with what's happening in a way that would help. This is true for all of the crises in the world. So whether that one you are closely connected with, or whether any others move your heart because you have some relation to the people there, it's also a radical Buddhist act to not stop with our connection to one group over another because we are related to them. If I have more Jewish than Arab in my bloodline or my community, I'm not, as a Buddhist, going to allow that to warp my compassion for what's happening there and my clear seeing of how harm is moving, nor the other way around. So, may the war end. And may we as practitioners see clearly the process of karma so that we can be most supportive of true solutions, true, I want to say the word ceasefire again, but I don't just mean that Israelis should stop bombing Gaza, although I mean that. What I mean is that fire is the root. And if we can cease firing in our own hearts, and if we can cause our leaders to cease firing, and if we can somehow make it possible that people rent apart by trauma, somehow be able to move in a different way in the world, this is the doing of no evil and the cultivation of the good. May all the fires cease. The Buddha said, the world is on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion. May those fires cease. They cease in your own heart when you wake up, and they cease in the Sangha as we help each other wake up. And if you don't have political power, which you probably don't have much of, may your actions in all the ways combine together with the actions of others to give rise to a world that is less burning. I don't know. May the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion cease. May the fires of burning fossil fuel cease. May the fires of the guns and tanks and weapons and bombs cease. All of those are the same fires. They are all greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's our practice to uproot them. So I'm going to come back to close to our friend and teacher, the Buddha, and the 1,250 arahants gathering together under a full moon in a grove of trees, gathering to celebrate this new arrival of the Dhamma in the world. And that here we are, we are the recipients of their passion in preserving this tradition. Sangha Day is a day to be grateful and to celebrate spiritual friendship, kalyanamitta, our connection to each other. So I want to just sing the Ovāda Pātimokkha together as a prayer for the ending of the fires, and then I want to have a few minutes to be in discussion together. So here's the Pali words of the Ovāda Pātimokkha. This is the middle verse. Doing no evil, engaging in what's skillful and purifying the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. This is the translation of my teacher, Gil Fronsdal, from his translation of the Dhammapada. So here's the Pali words. I'll do each line twice, so you can sing it back with me. Sabba papasa karanam. Sabba papasa karanam. Kusala supasampada. Kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam. Sachita pariyodapanam. Etang buddhana sasanam. Etang buddhana sasanam. Let's do it together. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasanam. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasanam. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasanam. A few years ago, I was doing a project of setting these Pali chants to more devotional music. So if I had my harmonium or a guitar, I would do this with you. But I'm just going to sing you the heart melody that I wrote for this for now. So this is your lullaby. If you're a European and it's late at night, it goes a little like this. Bring to mind in your heart the Sangha, whatever that means to you, and sit in the circle on a full moon night together and praise the Dhamma. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasanam. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasanam. Sabba papasa karanam kusala supasampada. Sachita pariyodapanam etam buddhana sasanam. Etam buddhana sasanam. So All right. So we'll close there for now. There could be more to say. Um, I'm going to give you a couple commercials before we go to the discussion. One, the entire Buddhist tradition is based on the perfection of giving. We give these teachings freely because to charge for them would diminish their value in the world. This Dhamma came freely from my teachers through me, and I give it to you. Take it and teach it to someone else. If you are inspired to support these teachings, your resources support Sangha Live and myself to give our time to do this. Thank you for anything you offer. Support the monastics that you know, if you know any, and any good causes. Give money to the people doing good things in the world. They need it. And thank you for any that you direct toward me and this organization and our Dharma friends. You can find my stuff on my website. I have a Tuesday night sitting group. It's a terrible timing for the Europeans. Sorry about that. But, you know, wake up at 4 a.m. Come join us. It's great. But anyway, recordings are always available, and we're starting to put them all on my YouTube channel, so you can find me there. And more things will happen with Sangha Live. If you're in the Bay Area or you want to do a big flight and you happen to be a gay man, I'm doing a retreat in April for a bunch of gay men. Come. And I've got some other teachings coming up at Spirit Rock in California online, including some sutta study class on overcoming distraction, because I know you've got some. So come to any of those things, and I hope that we get to sit in circle again sometime soon. Thank you so much for being here. And just a bit of opening here for any discussion, questions, complaint, anything I stirred up. I hope I did. It's my job. What you got? Emma, please.
Firstly, I just want to say it's been an absolute honour to be in presence with you tonight, Sean, and with the whole Sangha on this really special day. And thank you for the teachings that you shared tonight. I'm grateful beyond words, so thank you.
Blessings to you and your people. Very happy
Thank
to have you
you.
here.
So I'm from the UK and I live in the Northeast, and we are really blessed to have some Buddhist centres that we can visit, but there isn't actually a local Sangha in my area. And I've created recently a not-for-profit event that incorporates a lot of mindfulness, meditation. We've got some shamanic drummers and things as well. But I've really wanted to start a Sangha probably for about 10 years in the local area, but I've just not got around to it, and I don't know what the protocol is. I didn't know if you had any advice on that.
Invite some people over to your living room and sit together. I think it's time. I think you're ready. You know, you don't have to give a Dharma talk. You can invite folks over. You can listen to a guided meditation. You can listen to a recorded talk from someone. The most important thing is just to get into presence with people and to say, I don't want to be alone here. You're not alone here. Let's do this thing. It's been great for me. Try it out. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Blessings. Yeah, Ellis, please.
That was a wonderful talk. That was so wonderful. Thank you for that. But the area I live in a pretty rural area, so I thought you were talking about like Sangha. There is no like local Sangha. But in your lecture, I thought, well, perhaps that could be friends, family, people who've supported me on the journey before. Is that correct? Is that the correct teaching, or did I misinterpret?
I'm down with that. I think in your own heart, the gratitude for Sangha is toward those people that support you in your path.
Okay.
If you want to cultivate the Buddha's Dhamma in yourself, it's helpful to be around people who also are doing that. So that might not be friends and family. And if that's true, then you have the profound benefit of the world being online right now. And, you know, there's thousands of good teachers online now, and you can come to Sanghas, you know, regularly. And like we were talking about with Emma, you know, just popping a flyer on the local bulletin board and sitting with 3 people in your living room is a Sangha. And it's helpful to find, the Buddha said, of all the things that support one in one's spiritual practice, wise friends is the foremost. So find them wherever you can and connect with good people. That's
Thank you so much.
Really what you want to do. Yeah. Ron, my friend, please.
Hi, Sean. Great talk. Thank you. I think we've been down this road before, but I'm just going to ask it again. Maybe someday I'll get it. But I have a hard time squaring karma and choice.
Small question.
Yeah. Always at the end of the talk, too.
Yeah, for sure. No, my briefest answer is think about it this way. Whether or not choice is something that we think of as being owned by us as individual souls or people, or whether choice is something that we seem to have because conditions have assembled for the mind to be in this moment. Whichever one of those is true, the appearance of choice is all that's needed for us to have the responsibility to act ethically. So it doesn't matter whether there's free will. Cosmically, that's just a narrative. The truth of the matter is that you can act in ways that hurt people or help them. And whether there's a self behind that choice or whether that choice is real or illusory doesn't actually matter. What actually matters is that you can hurt people. And it's not good to do that. And the reason for that is not because cosmically somehow it does something. It's because hurting people sticks in your own mind stream and in theirs forever. And it makes it very difficult to be happy and recover from suffering if you're hurting people. And so even if you take some radical non-dual perspective, which mostly, as you know, I find not that useful, and say, oh, we're all just illusions and action is an illusion, you can fall into a real nihilism there. But I think the way out of that is to say that whatever narrative you use to understand what choice means, there's a reality, which is that people and beings are real. And don't hurt them, right? Because the only way to purify the mind, right, to come to this profound stillness, is to be free from regret about your actions. And so at the heart of ethics for meditation is how do we figure out how to come to a mind that can actually let go so deeply that we're at peace. And you can do that by not hurting people. And so don't worry about whether choice is real, but make good choices. That's a short answer to that. Yeah. We can keep going around that one.
Yeah, got it. Thanks, my friend. Good to see
everybody,
you.
We're right on our time. I want to hear the question from DF because their hand is up, and beyond that, we will dissolve into the Deva realms. Please, DF.
Thank you so much. No, it was just a comment that I don't know. I think one of the reasons I enjoyed your talk so much is your perspective of different translations. I don't know what it is about your background, but to be able to describe, okay, no, you can actually see it from these 3 different perspectives was that was liberating. No, it's not that story. You can see it 3 other ways, and that is great. So thank you for that.
It's always good to hold in mind, because we are translating these stories in this Dhamma, not just between languages, but between cultures and eras and times and positionalities. And translation is difficult. Ask any translator. So I think it's appropriate to have a range of understandings and then to really feel what's skillful and helpful for us. Yeah. All right. Blessings to you. To everyone who stuck here with us, thank you and blessings. To Marnie for your support today, thank you and blessings.